Hey guys, so today I wanted to do a little recap of my BookNet Fest experience because I did go last weekend, September 7th and 8th, and it took place in Orlando, Florida, and I thought it was a fantastic event. So first of all, a huge thank you to Sam and Marina's, who were the co-founders of this event, and this was the second year BookNet Fest has been a thing. They did such a good job orchestrating it, and also a huge thank you to all the sponsors who helped with this event and all of the volunteers who helped to make this event possible. It was just such a well done event, and I'm kind of shocked that this was only the second year because it was so professional and so well organized. It seems like they've been doing this for a while, so huge praise to them for putting this on. It was so great. If you haven't heard of BookNet Fest before, I did a tag on it before I went. It's kind of like a convention of sorts, really based around the community aspect of people online sharing their loves for books. So that's like through Twitter, book blogs, YouTube, of course, Instagram, just all avenues for books and also authors, readers alike. But the biggest focus of this whole event, I would say, is community and discussion. I'm kind of going to share how each day went. So it took place over a Friday and a Saturday. I just have to say, I was so nervous and anxious going into this on Friday. I went by myself. I didn't really have a group of people I was going with. I did feel a little bit lost, and it was no one's fault except my own. Like, I'm not putting blame on anyone else because everyone who I talked to was super friendly and super nice. Like, I've never been to an event, I think, where everyone was so kind, and it just really made me feel happy to be a part of something that just had such a really great group of people present. How this event kind of works out is there are usually 2 panels of sorts going on at a time, and there also may be like a workshop, so you kind of have to decide what you want to do for that hour, and each panel discussion is kind of broken up into hour segments with little breaks in between. So the first panel that I went to was the writer and fan panel. I still need to read Brightly Burning because the author was on that panel there, and she was actually there the whole weekend, which made me just super curious about reading her Jane Eyre retelling. So that was the first panel that I went to. Next, I went to the small community panel, which I really loved because I feel like that's where I am with on Instagram and BookTube. Definitely shout out to Sophie. She was so inspirational up on that panel, and she just seriously gave me so much motivation and encouragement to just keep going with what I'm doing. And so just huge kudos to Sophie up there. So after that, I went to the portrayals of mental health in fiction, which was awesome. I'm gonna try to think of other words to say besides just great and awesome and amazing, but seriously, that's how these panels were. Discussions that were brought up in these panels are seriously so relatable and just give such a good perspective on just so many different aspects of this book community that aren't necessarily touched on every day and in every video that we see, but are an undercurrent to it all, if that makes any sense at all. So I honestly think what these panels brought up and discussed are seriously gonna resonate with me for quite a while now. I mean, they really were inspirational and eye-opening, and I'm just so thankful that I got to sit in and listen on this. It was just a really great experience. The last panel of the day that I went to was the Outside of Romance panel, which I so appreciated. First of all, it was so hard to decide what panels to go to because I wanted to go to all of them. So this was no easy decision picking which panels I was going to go to. I'm really glad that I went to this Outside of Romance panel because I think it's really important that there are books out there that have non-romantic relationships and that we can see friendships without like a relationship as the end goal in sight, and just to hear that there are other readers out there who agree. And of course, romance is going to be a very popular thing in books. People want to ship things, like that was all discussed. But I think there are so many times I read a book where there's a romance that I feel like there was no need for it. I love romance in books, but I also think it sometimes is done to the detriment of the story. The final thing that I went to that day was not a panel, it was the Snark Squad Pod Live. So they have a podcast, which I'd never listened to before, called the Snark Squad, and they talked all things Pride and Prejudice, which I had to sit in on because I loved hearing all their different perspectives. I want to reread Pride and Prejudice. I also especially want to listen to the audiobook that was narrated by Rosamund something, but a couple girls talked about it up on the panel, and they just talked about how much they loved the audiobook, and I've never listened to a classic on audio before. Rosamund Pike, that's her name. I knew it would come to me eventually, but I am definitely going to be listening to that. And I also loved how there was such a divide between like the BBC Pride and Prejudice and the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, because I'm just gonna put it here. I am a 2005 Pride and Prejudice girl. I absolutely love that movie. There's been a vlog of me watching that movie because it's just so amazing and I love it. And no harsh on the BBC version. I just hadn't ever really watched that until a couple years ago. So it's just, I was introduced first to the 2005 version, which I feel like is how it goes. Like whichever one you were introduced to first is the one that you really fell in love with. But I am getting way off track of all the BookNet Fest things. So after BookNet Fest day one, I was just a little bit drained. I just felt really kind of overwhelmed with how much I wanted to talk to people, but I just felt in myself like I felt something holding me back from doing that. So that's kind of how I left BookNet Fest day one. And after that, I was so determined when I left the first day. I said, you know what, Saturday, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to put myself out there. It's going to be fine because everybody's nice. And so let's go into BookNet Fest day two. So BookNet Fest day two opened with the keynote speaker talking a little bit about the event, how it was formed. And obviously I just loved hearing about that because I think this is an important event. If you have even the slightest interest in going to BookNet Fest, I would highly encourage you to do so next year. I don't think it's possible you could ever regret going to an event like this because, like I said before, there are just so many kind, genuine people at this event, and the discussions that are developed here are incredible and really can change your perspective on your community, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, blogs, like whichever. I think it can have a large impact on all of that. Also, after going to this event, it made me realize that I do not want to go to a large event like BookCon and BEA, which I have wanted to go to those events for maybe like over 5 years now. I get so jealous every single year when I see people posting about it. But after going to this event, I think I realized I don't really want that. I like the smaller community aspect of BookNet Fest, and I'm kind of glad it cured me of my jealous desire to go to BookCon and BEA, which I don't know if it had that intention, but it really made me very content not going to one of those big events where I would just get lost in a sea of people and it's just all crazy and rushing. Let's move on a little more into the other panels that were on day two. So next I went to the panel for sex and fiction, which I really liked that I had gone to the panel of like platonic relationships in fiction beforehand, and then I went to this one because it was a really good contrast. I think one was obviously talking more about romance in fiction and one was talking about how it's important that we don't always have romance in fiction. So I really liked that both of these panels were available at this event so you could see such a balance between the two. Next there was a little break for lunch, and I just want to give a huge shout out to some wonderful people who invited me over to sit with them at lunch, and they were just so kind to me. Although I was talking to people a little more on BookNet Fest day two, I still struggled so hard with approaching people because it's just I've never ever been good at that. This whole event was a huge stretch for me and something completely out of my comfort zone, which I know it was for a lot of people, so I'm happy that we all had that in common. But these people just inviting me over to sit with them, it really meant a lot to me. So a huge thank you to all those wonderful people at that table who invited me over, and I just was able to have some great conversations with people about books, and it's all I really wanted. The panel that I went to after lunch was critical reading and reviewing, which I think for me was the most inspirational in the sense that it inspired me to create more reviews on my channel, and it reminded me of the reason I came to BookTube in the first place years and years ago, and it was to talk about books and to hear book reviews on books that I'd loved and to see if everyone else had the same opinion of me or just discuss nuances and opinion. It is now going to be a goal of mine to do more reviews because I have stopped doing them as much. I don't really know how critical I will be able to be in reviewing because I'm not really good at being a critical reviewer, but it is something that I want to grow in. That is something that I definitely took away from that panel. The final panel that I went to of the day of BookNet Fest was the Women of Color panel, which was fantastic. I really hope there can be a culture of change that develops, especially after people sit in and can hear those real stories from real women and just see the hurt that's there. But it was Definitely a fantastic panel, and I really loved that was the last panel of BookNet Fest. And it wasn't just someone talking about this issue, it was actual women who had experienced these issues, which I think is what made it all that much more powerful. That ended up the panel section of BookNet Fest. There was a little mixer afterward, and I got to talk to just some really great people. It was such a welcoming community that was at this event. It was honestly kind of shocking that people could be so inclusive and so kind. I seriously cannot stress that enough about this event and the people that were at this event. So I'm just so grateful for everyone I spoke with. I have a list of recommendations of books that I need to get to after talking with some people that I'm really excited to. And I have recently followed a lot more YouTube channels and Bookstagrams. So wonderful to have actually met some of these people, and I can like see their face, and I've interacted with them, and there's now such more of a community aspect to sharing, I feel like, online because of this experience. I'm sure as soon as I stop filming, I'm gonna realize all these other things that I wanted to say but that I forgot to say. I do plan on going next year, next September. We already have the dates. I really hope that the people who I met this year will be returning next year because I'd love to just see them all again. So I'm gonna end this video now. Thank you for sticking around if you did, and happy reading.